Welcome to Level Up, the Career Playbook, or as I am now calling it, how to be better at your job. This is the podcast where we cut through the bullshit. We give you the real, actionable tools to reach your career goals and thrive. Whether you're just starting out, climbing the ladder, or redefining your role, this is where we unpack the stories, the strategies, and the skills that make the difference. I'm your host, Brian Bell, and today I'm amped because we're diving deep into leadership resilience and what it really takes to create growth in today's always changing business world. All right, let me get real for a quick second. This podcast is not just about career advice. I started this because so many of us are navigating our careers with more questions than answers. How do you actually stand out? How do we lead with impact and not just a title? How do you build a career that feels as good as it looks on paper? That's what we explore here, and the guests who've been there to live and tell the tale. Speaking of incredible guests, today's guest is Joelle Kaufman. She's a go-to market wizard, a revenue catalyst, and someone who knows how to turn chaos into clarity. She's launched massive successes like Bloomreach, mastered data-driven leadership at GTM Flow, and coached teams into delivering the kind of results that make you say, wait, how did they do that? Now, if you're ready to learn how to align teams, create growth, and make smarter moves in your career, this episode is going to be a gold mine, so please pay attention. All right, Joelle, welcome to the show. How the hell are you?
Brian, I am doing great, and it is just so great to be here. I love the topic. I love what you're trying to do. I think there are so many ways to build a career, and that when we accept there isn't one path and there are no guarantees, but there is only change and opportunity, then it becomes fun.
I agree with you. And a little backstory, I worked with you now 10 plus years ago. We were just catching up a little bit at a company called Bloomreach. We were talking about how I was mind blown about how you and your teams operated. And I learned so much so long ago, and you've added to that skill set. And so I am thankful and I am honored that you're here because, Joelle, you are absolutely amazing. And like you said, you could go and be an amazing leader, but now you can go out and create amazing leaders. So I appreciate you taking time so we can pull some of this out of your brain. So if you're aspiring to be great, this is going to be a great place for you to learn. So thank you. I'm super, super happy that you're here.
Let's do it.
All right, let's start from the very, very beginning before we get to the questions. Who are you? And why the hell should somebody care about who Joelle Kaufman is and what she has to say? And I know why you're here, but tell the audience and the people that are listening or watching why you have something to tell.
So since 1990, I have built B2B, SaaS, and AI companies. I've created categories. I've created businesses. My companies that I had the pleasure of being part of have been acquired by Microsoft, by Cisco, by Cox. They've been merged into big PE ventures. They are unicorns. So I have a track record of taking something that had evidence of product market fit and then expanding it and growing it so it could scale and thrive and get to a successful exit. So professionally, there's not tons of people who've done that over and over and over and over. And I've done that for 25 years. But there are two things I'm prouder of. Number one is I can easily identify about 1,000 leaders who are using principles I developed and I implemented with my teams, and they are using them in their companies. So things that I invented, they refined, are used by teams at Google and Apple and Asana and Airbnb because the people have ended up in all of these fabulous places. So I'm very proud to have been scalable by developing great people that take things that they know work and use them. Number two is I did all of this while having 3 kids who have developed into human beings that I'm proud to know, that I like and they like me. So I didn't compromise my family for my career. I struggled because it was always hard. I struggled to find some balance in building these great companies and being the kind of friend, parent, spouse that I wanted to be.
And that is really understated. It is very hard. I have 3 that are a little bit little. Or trying to have your side business and trying to make sure you're showing up to be the best at all of those. And you did it with a smile on your face every day. And I remember you'd walk in the office. I'm like, that's a boss. And I think so many people would watch and be like, I would be like, Joelle, and you have this pedigree of people I think that would absolutely mimic and agree with what I'm saying. So
Thank you.
props to you for that. Okay. Now, this is kind of a sports theme related. It's the Career Playbook. And so we're going to do this in segments that are more sports related. The first segment is the pregame. We're going to go back to foundational years, your early influences. So from the beginning, now you have this amazing 25 plus year career. You've done all the things. What were the things? Let's start maybe not as far as back as high school, but college, your first jobs. What were those experiences early on that shaped your approach to like, I'm going to be this boss of a leader? How did you get to the Joelle that we see here today from the beginning?
Okay. So a few things. Way back, and it's funny because I use a sports metaphor too. So way back when I was 13, that was the first time cancer entered my family and my mother was diagnosed. She is a 40-year survivor, but it was a curveball. It is. It's woo woo, let's cheer, right? But I was 13 the first time, 15 the second, and so on and so on. I came into my adulthood with a perspective that really big curveballs can hit you, really big ones. And you have to stand at the plate. You have to have an approach because you can't walk off the field. That's the pitch. You don't choose it. So that was a very foundational thing. The next thing was the first real big leadership opportunity I had. I was elected president of my pledge class of my sorority. Now that may sound ridiculous, but if you've ever tried to lead 48 women, it is a non-trivial matter. And this is going to be really important, I was never the most popular kid. So to be elected, I was like, how did that happen? And then I made an assumption that was wrong. But my assumption was, well, we've set out goals that we want to accomplish as a pledge class. And they chose me because they knew I would get us to those goals. And we can come back to the later story about that meeting you sat in on. But I was focused on the goals. And we did. We accomplished those goals. And they hated me. Because it turns out the actual goal of a pledge class is to get to know each other, to bond, to build relationships that sustain, hopefully, for a lifetime. And whether or not you achieve certain targets, you know what? Who cares? Who cares? I'm very goal-oriented. And so that failure and the incoming president of the House who spoke to me about it afterwards and then coached me. So I had the benefit of being coached when I was 18 years old. Not just coached in sport, I was coached in that too. And we all think that's normal. I was coached in leadership. And what Teresa Fraley said to me was, you are the right person to lead the House after me. I said, there's no way. She said, you just got to learn how to communicate. And I said, what are you talking about? I'm direct. Like you asked me, I'm direct. I think I still would have that moniker. Joelle's pretty direct. But it turns out that I wasn't tuning in to what people were really saying and what people really needed from me. And I needed to get much more skilled at that to be effective as a leader. And so I had this phenomenal opportunity to be coached for a year by this 20-year-old. But she was really good. She had that skill in spades. And ultimately, I did become president of the House, and they didn't hate me. And it started a journey of learning if you're fearless enough to want to lead, or stupid enough, or egotistical enough, or whatever word you'd like to put in. But if you have the desire to lead, do you have the skills to be followed? Now, I have a lot of natural charisma, but that's not it. That's a short term. Do I want to be with that person for years? I mean, I will say, Brian, one of the things I'm proudest of is the number of people who have worked for me at multiple places, because working for me and on the teams that I created was an incredibly rewarding experience for them personally and professionally. But I had to learn how to do that. And it isn't just about the goals. Goals are important. It was also about communication. And so the last foundational thing was when I was working at RSA Security. They brought all the directors and up into a training. And the training was a 2 or 3 day program on what's called process communication model. And I thought it was amazing. I mean, I had majored in organizational psychology, and here I am, I post my MBA, and what we're talking about for these 3 days or 2 days, I don't remember, was, are you communicating the way you need to communicate or the way Brian needs to hear it? If you are going to lead human beings, if you are going to execute, if you are going to resolve conflict and stay aligned, you will have to communicate the way you need to hear it, which is not the way I need to say it.
Yeah.
And so that awareness and learning how to know how you need to hear it, how to adapt while being direct and authentic. Really, those three experiences shaped how I became what you saw at Bloomreach.
Okay, so let me go back to being elected president. Somebody took you under the wing, and what I have gotten from all of my guests are somebody ends up kind of taking them under their wing and being their mentor, either formally or informally. I had it with Sandra at Bloomreach. You had it at your sorority, and all my different guests have had it. And my question for you is, and for people that don't have mentors, did you ask for that, or did she see something in you? Because what I want to get at is, for the people that don't get that, how do they find that opportunity like you were able to?
So Teresa offered it, right? Teresa had a problem, which was she wanted to build succession into her legacy as a leader. She was a very forward-thinking person.
It was amazing for a 20-year-old.
She was an amazing person. She is an amazing person. But she wanted to know that after she led, she would leave the house in good hands. And frankly, I wanted to do the same when I took on the mantle. So we were friends. I mean, I don't know, like she was a junior, I was a freshman. You'd have to ask her what it was. But I think she said, I want to build this succession. And Joelle has a lot of the raw ingredients. And clearly, and she was elected president of the pledge class, there's something about her that people were drawn to as a leader. But she's a little rough around the edges. And so,
wait, let me ask that. What do you think people are drawn to? Were you open saying, I want to be the next leader? Because you've always just been a leader to me. What was it? Because I'm thinking about somebody listening to this, and if they want to be the next Joelle or the better than Joelle, whatever that looks like, right? Are they, I'm going to be a leader, and that's an intentional thing? Is it, I'm going to go to the people in charge and say, I want to be a leader, take me under their wing? Or what were you showing for people? You had to do something for somebody to look at you and be like, you know what, I'm going to take you under my wing.
So first up, you should always be the kind of leader that suits you. So please don't try to be the best Joelle, because unless you're me, that's going to feel like you're wearing someone else's shirt. And there are lots of different styles of leaders, and they all succeed. I would say Raj at Bloomreach and Joelle are very different kinds of leaders, and both effective. So the way to be a leader is to lead. So take something on, volunteer, take responsibility, and follow through. Don't ask for it to be granted. This is one of the things I told everyone who was working for me. You want that promotion, do the next job. Show that you can do the job, and the promotion's a no-brainer. Right? Take it on.
I hear that a lot. I'm obviously in HR, and I hear, well, I'm not going to do a job if I'm not going to get paid for it. And you get what you do, right?
You know, Brian, what I said, I remember the first time I was hired into a leadership role. It was at Reactivity, and they needed a head of marketing, and I had never worked in marketing. I'd done sales, I'd done biz dev, I'd done product. I'd certainly informed the messaging, but I had never been in a marketing job. And the CEO, there were a whole host of reasons too long for this podcast. I was a good fit, even though they didn't think so initially. So that's another thing. Like the person said to me in the interview, the first person said to me, like, Joelle, we have a whole spec. We're interviewing you as a courtesy to this thought leader who asked us to, because you don't match anything on the spec. I said, oh.
Thank you.
And then he, to his credit, said, yeah, the spec's wrong. We have to hire you. So I offer to people that are hiring, like, you're looking for horsepower. You're looking for people who will take things on and learn, collaborate, and get stuff done. So what's on the spec sheet is a guideline, not tablets where we've etched in stone. Okay. So the CEO, when he interviews me, says, you know, everyone wants me to hire you, so we're going to do that. But I can't hire you as a VP. You have zero background. I want to hire you as the director of marketing, but you'll sit with our executive team and I'm not going to hire someone above you unless you don't perform. And I said, okay, Glenn, I'll take that bet. I will bet on me, but what I want is a timeline. So within 12 months, if I prove myself, you will promote me to VP of marketing. And he said, that's a fair. And I said, we can set criteria. Like I'm fine. As we've noticed, I'm goal driven. I'm fine. I should mention, Brian, and for all of your listeners, I was 7 months pregnant in this conversation. So to his great credit, he did not even consider the fact that I was pregnant and I was going to have to take some leave. That wasn't in his decision criteria. So don't insert limitations. Exactly. Like here for Glenn Osaka. And so I took the job. I did the job. We had a major crisis a month into the job. So I ended up doing some work on my maternity leave. Not a lot, but I had to do some because I was the head of marketing and there was a crisis. I was promoted in 6 months. And that was my catalyst to now I've been a head of marketing. And I did that job for 3.5 years in a industry where we churn through our marketing leaders in 18 months. So I did have to learn a lot. I didn't know lead gen, demand gen. I didn't know PR, but I like to learn. And I will always take the bet that if I can seize an opportunity and show you what I can do, good things are going to happen.
We're going to get to this because you make it sound so easy, but I want to get to
It's not.
I told him that you should give me this promotion if I do it. I got it in 6 months. There was clearly a lot of stuff that happened in that 180 days and
Yes.
how you showed up, the way you paced yourself, the way that you, like, that's what I want to get to because there was some magic that happened there, and I don't like to call it magic. There was some hard work that happened. I want to talk so people really understand what it takes to get there because I imagine it was hard work. But let's keep going a little bit more into your early years. Okay, you worked at transformative companies. We've talked about Blue Reach quite a bit. You worked at Workboard. At the earlier first couple, I think you've talked about a few of them early in your career. Were there any specific lessons that you took from those that have stayed with your career of like, this is my mantra, this is how I operate, this is how I think moving forward?
Yeah. Let's go into right before reactivity when I was at RSA Security. So I had this fabulous course. I did another course on my own called the Landmark Forum, and people are controversial about that, but I found it very impactful.
Why is that controversial? Curious.
Well, because it stems from EST and people are like, oh, it's very cult-like. And a big part of the Landmark Forum is encouraging other people to do the Landmark Forum. And just so everyone knows, there's no like points program. Nobody knows if you did that or not. The actual point of asking somebody to enroll in a forum or anything else is to practice asking people to do something and the discomfort that comes with asking people to do something. In fact, I'm on your podcast because I asked you, how can I help? And can I be on your podcast? And that's uncomfortable because you could say, Joelle, you're not an HR person. This isn't really where I'm going. And then I would have been rejected and maybe I would have felt bad. You didn't. I didn't.
I didn't ask you because I didn't want to get rejected because I was like, Joelle is here. I got to work my way up to that.
Both, right? And so you ask like, all right, so I want to tell you about this thing. So I did this Landmark thing and I realized, I'd had my first kid and I really didn't like the job I was in at RSA, but I felt pretty stuck. I needed the income. It was good with the daycare. I could balance, but I was feeling like I was marking time. And I'm like, damn, life is too short. I got this whole cancer story, right? And this cancer thing keeps coming up. Life is short. I don't know if I've got 70 years or if I've got 2. And I came at a Landmark and I said, what would happen if I showed up at work and I was a bit fearless and I put out there that I want to do something great? I don't know what that is, but I want to do something great. I want to do something that matters. And then I just start listening for the opportunities because they're there. But we all get our blinders on. I have this to do. I have this deadline. I have this thing. I have to get home. And we have to relieve the blinders and just pause. Because on the Monday that I showed up, a solution engineer walks in, and this is 2002, and he says, I don't know why we're not doing anything with XML and web services. It's going to be the future. We're a security company. They're not secure. And I said, well, you think we should do something? He said, yeah. I said, you willing to bet your career on it? And he said, what do you mean? I said, I will. I'll bet mine. I'll go and we'll do the research and we'll figure out what needs to happen. And over the course of the week, Brian, I used my ample energy, my communication skills that they had helped me refine, that Teresa had helped me build. And I got the division of the company to commit half the resources of the company, of the division, to figuring out what we should build in web services, because we knew that the stuff we already had for SSL and other kinds of encryption was not going to be a big enough market. Now, Brian, we talked to 35 customers. We came up with a prototype. We had a great business plan. And ultimately, the company said, that is great, and we're not going to fund it. We have other obligations, and we can't do this, but it is great, and you did great. And by the way, we're actually going to fire half the company because we can't afford everybody on the other business. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, did I cause, including myself? That's how I ended up 7 months pregnant going to reactivity. But did I cause this? And one of the engineers came into my office to talk afterwards. And I said, I'm sorry. I mean, I feel like we were doing the right thing. And he looked at me and he said, best 6 months of my career. I would do it again, even if I knew the outcome.
Wow.
And I want to do work like this. So I learned from Landmark that you got to play all out. Don't be obnoxious. I didn't neglect other responsibilities. Like, it's work. You have to meet your responsibilities. And if you want to rise, go beyond.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go beyond on every axis. But you've got to go beyond because it shows your drive. It shows your commitment. It shows your willingness to take risks. These are the things that start to matter. And ultimately, it shows that other people are actually willing to follow you, which turns out to be important in leadership.
So you took risks, but it sounded like you took measured risks with research and thought, but you have to put your neck out there.
You do.
You didn't quite understand, so you took a week to get to understand, like, okay, I'm willing to put my career on the line for this. Was it an educated risk, or was it like...
Yeah, I'm saving some stories. Like, I knew enough because of the space. I had been working in the space. There were other people I'd been talking to. I knew enough. And look, let's fast forward. It's 2025. You know, people talk about APIs and we connect over API. That's a web service. Like, the entire internet runs on web services.
Correct.
So we were right. It was going to be a big space.
Just too early. You just a little too early.
Too early. We might have had the wrong solution. We might have been the wrong company. There's lots of reasons, but we were onto the right space.
Okay. But it is, I think...
Wait. One of the things, because I've been in tech, I always cultivated strong relationships with really elite engineers. So part of how I knew that his statement about XML web services was on is I made a few phone calls, and the leading engineers I knew, the ones that I'd worked with at Firefly out of MIT, the ones that were out of Stanford, the ones that were out of Carnegie Mellon, were all like, oh yeah, no, it's all XML. We're all going there. So I was getting all this data that, like, I could see the front of the wave.
Create the relationships, make sure you validate, but then go and do it. You mentioned something that just kind of triggers something more of a sports analogy, but it's play all out. And I think that people show up.
Yes.
And maybe if you haven't played sports, you played sports, I played sports, but I remember some games, I played basketball and football, and I look back and I'm like, I didn't play defense hard enough, or I should have I should have done this if I should have been more tired after the game. And I think that same analogy should be applying to work, where you go all out. And you also said you went all out with measure. You didn't just bowl in a China shop, but actually putting in the work matters. And those are the people that get recognized. And those are the people that get the opportunities.
So I'm going to build on your go all out. It's not go all out at work. It's go all out in your life.
Yes.
Your life is a precious gift. It's a precious gift. And why do you want to live it holding back? I mean, I've raised 3 athletes. We said the way you play and practice is what shows up in the game. So if you're at work, the way you are at work is how you will be when it really matters. And that doesn't mean you should be worried that people are watching you all the time. People are watching you all the time because that's what human beings do. You're watching everybody else. But if you're a force for creativity, for innovation, and if you can be relied upon, if your word is good, if you say, I'm going to do that. And Brian, you don't have to think about it. I've said I'm going to do it. It will be done. You're in the top 5% of people in the office ever.
Which is crazy, but true. But it is
But
true.
why should it be? It should be 100%.
Yeah.
So if you want to get promoted, you want to level up your career, be somebody that can be relied on, be somebody that is creative and innovative, be somebody who is, I used to tell my teams, a most requested player, not just an MVP, but most requested, which means the way you do your work, the lessons I got from Teresa, the way you do your work is encouraging and inviting to other people. You help make them better.
And they're drawn towards you. That's a very good call. Okay, in the interest of time, because we could go down, I have more there, but okay, let's go to the second segment. It's called the playbook. Let's get more into the actual strategies for success. And I'm going to start with what you're currently doing, but I want to also then double back to a moment that you and I had, and I want to really talk about how you have your teams operate, what are specifically you're doing, because there's a moment that you and I were talking about earlier about how you operate your team, so I want to get to. But first, okay, currently you working and you started your own thing during COVID, GTM Flow, is that what we're what you're talking about?
That's it. That's the name.
Optimize the go-to-market flywheel. And I stalked your LinkedIn page and you mentioned neuropsychology and you mentioned AI. What is what you're doing actually mean to us normal folks? And obviously what you're doing is creating better leaders, better people, better processes. What is it what you're doing and why does it matter?
Okay, so first off, leaders are, if you will, the leverage point of any organization, right? It is through leaders that people know what to focus on. It is through leaders that people know where they need to improve or where there are opportunities. Leaders are the linchpin. And one of the things we do in tech is we undervalue leaders and the impact they have. And there's a saying in HR, people don't leave for jobs, they leave leaders. They leave the person. I have encouraged people to leave when they had great opportunities, but often they've done so in tears. I'm like, hey, it's okay. It's good. I want you to grow and I want you to thrive. Okay. So what I do is I actually use a sports analogy. I help every go-to-market leader have an approach, and their approach will then be applied to all the various curveballs that they see because they are a leader. So an approach starts with what's important. Clarity of focus, what's important. Part of clarity is also being able to see, and that's a curveball. Okay. Number 2, I help them understand what are the strengths they can rely on. Yeah, we all want to grow and build. That's great. But we all have innate strengths, and our teams, if they've composed, whether intentionally or accidentally, our teams have strengths. So when we're going to play, we need to know what our strengths are. We need to have a mindset, right? So now that we know what's important and we know our strengths, are we scared of the curveball or are we prepared and almost intrigued by the curveball? Doesn't matter. It's still a curveball, right? It's what energy you're spending on it. And then what are our resources, i.e. our cash position, our technology, our customers and partners. So I have this whole thing that's part of my approach. And then I have to know how to communicate what's going on, what's important, what are our alternatives, get other people's ideas. All of that's approach. The application could be a major customer canceled, could be we're late on delivering a product, could be our conversion rate isn't heading in the right direction. There's a lot of tactical things. And so by focusing on approach, we actually take leaders from being tactical heroes and firefighters that are just going from situation to situation to situation into strategic leaders who are thinking about possibilities and seeing things from different perspectives so that when they act, And when they move their teams to action, it has the best probability of long-term success. And the results, they speak for themselves. My clients drive more pipeline, more conversion, more revenue, and they're not working as hard because they are using an approach.
Let me dig there. And I came up with the acronym and I forgot it. So it was Clarity, CSMRC. Clarity, yes, I forgot.
Strengths, mindset,
results,
resources,
and then
and communication. Exactly.
Okay, so we don't have time here, and that's why we need to. We'll talk about how to reach you and find you in a little bit. But at a high level, are you saying then, as anybody, I want to be a leader or I am a leader, on day one, I need to sit down and I need to kind of write these things out, or is this something that's on my brain all the time? Like anytime I open my mouth, I need to have clarity and I need to have like
that's too much.
Framing it. Yeah, that's
so. I think you can look. If you play baseball, you don't only bat in a game, right? You practice and you get feedback. And so, what I would suggest is you say, okay, I'm going into work. What do I want to try on? Maybe I want to try on being fearless. Maybe I want to try on listening more actively. What is the thing I want to try on as a individual, as a leader, just to observe what happens? And I'm building skills. So when I work with clients, we're actually practicing things over time to increase the muscle memory. Because when you see a curveball, the first thing you do is go, oh, shit. But if you have the muscle memory, you're like, that's a curveball. And now I have a toolkit and I know what to do.
I'm going to stay
and
in
I'm
there.
Good. Right. I'm gonna lay off the ball. I'm gonna lean into my strengths. I'm gonna swing through. I'm good. So you want to be practicing, but you don't want to be obsessing like I need to do these things every time. First time, you're not seeing curveballs every time. Most of life is pretty normal and uneventful. Right? Curveballs are the events. Right? So in the uneventful, practice some of the skills that will help you when you see a curveball.
This is going to seem like an obvious answer, but then are great leaders born or they're built? Because once again, to me, when I worked with you eons ago, it seemed very natural. But are you saying that the people like you, the great leaders I worked with, Ed McDonald, amazing leader at Asana, and it's like, how do you know this? How do you know this framework? And how do you show up so calm? And how are you thinking about 1,000 things all the time? It feels too natural for it's something that you learned at MIT or at Harvard or whatever, but maybe it is. So is it you have to go through a GTM Flow course with Joelle, or are people doing this, or what is it?
So I think it's about being curious and saying, I want to be a great leader. And I don't believe that leaders are born. I think great leaders are cultivated. And great leaders are great learners. And what they want to learn about is, how do I be a great leader? Right? That's the quest. How do I lead people so that we're more successful, so that we're more effective, so that we deal with crises well? If you are curious and motivated to be good at something, then you'll seek opportunities to learn how to be good at something. That could be you sitting in on a meeting and watching someone who does something well and saying, oh, what could I learn from that? And pausing to know, what should I learn from that? It could be a performance review where someone's giving you feedback and you might not like the feedback, but there's an opportunity for growth, for learning. Courses, if that's what turns you on. I like the idea of having a coach. I think that there's a safety in having a coach who's on your side, but experienced and direct, because, my clients know I don't really listen to them and say, oh, that's okay. I'll be like, have you thought about, anyhow. But there's lots of pathways. There's not one way, but the way to be a leader is to want to be a leader, to learn how to lead, and to continuously seek to improve your leadership.
Okay, I'm going to take the alley you just gave me, and you were talking about asking to sit in. And I once again, I'm going to go back to when we were working together. I saw how when you were leading marketing at the time, how everybody in your team, you were the one that pushed OKRs. And I remember where you sat on the wall, there was a thing that said BHAG. And I'm like, to this day, I remember BHAG and big hairy ass goals. And I remember at the time, I'm like, Joel is doing too much. What is going on? But it stuck with me. And the BHAG and the OKRs. And now I'm like, oh, I get it now. This matters. But you and your teams, you've already mentioned you're very goal-oriented, but you and your teams operated in a way that just meant that your teams produced better. So walk me through as a leader. Maybe you've changed your style since the meeting that I asked if I could sit in and watch your team do their OKRs. But can you walk me through that process of how you were operationalizing goal setting and then reporting back on them?
Yeah. And what I want to be clear is the way I use OKRs is as a fundamental part of how I'm leading the team. It's not something we do once or twice a quarter because we have to report up to HR or to leadership. So the big hairy ass goals, there actually is a offsite once a year where we're brainstorming and wrestling, given what the company wants to do. What are the big hairy ass goals we could take on with the expectation that even if we get close to it, it's transformational, right? So the team knows it's safe to be ambitious here. They're not going to be pilloried, down reviewed, or anything for aiming high and getting close. On my team, where you end up in trouble is if you don't follow through on what you say you're going to do. Not the results, right? That, okay, we're aiming at this. We're going to do all the things we need to do to get to this. And if we get close to this, great. So the BHAGs are an alignment exercise. And there were only 5. And I never allowed more than 5 because they are an exercise in priorities.
Yeah.
The way the team performs is they know what's important. And they know what's important because we've actually done the work to determine what's important. Now that we know what's important, we can actually move to, all right,
let's
given
stop
that those...
time out there. Finding out what's important.
Yeah.
Are you telling your team what's important? Are you having one-to-ones?
Nope.
Are you team functions? What are you doing to figure out out of 1,000 priorities you got to do, you narrow it down to 5. How are you doing that?
So you have to start with, what are we trying to accomplish as a company? So are we trying to pivot to something? Are we trying to build into new markets? Are we trying to launch a new product? What are the big strategic choices for the company? So you know them, and you have, okay, brainstorm. Everyone brainstorms. There's no wrong answers. And then I actually ask the team to start prioritizing which ones they feel could have the biggest impact on some of the company's priorities. And to be specific, I learned to actually break this up into a multi-day exercise so that people had time to reflect and think. So then we come back and I actually was using a spreadsheet, but there's software that you can do it. People are scoring and we're shortlisting. And then we're discussing, and why do we think that would be impactful? Why do we think that would be? And we're not talking about tactics here. We're talking about goals. Why would that goal move the needle? And there are no sacred cows. I put something out there. Anybody can say, I don't think that's going to move the needle. Here's why. I think it would move the needle like this. Now, I have improved on it by asking people to build on. So, yes, Brian, that's a great idea. And if we did this, it would move the needle more. And so we're refining it because people execute on, deliver what they create, what they own. So I'm not telling them. And you could argue, oh my God, you took everybody out for 2 days, all the stuff that didn't get done. Correct. Because everything that would come after would be faster and higher quality because we paused and we did the work of alignment. Now, Brian, 6 weeks later, we always reviewed, and I think you saw in that meeting, we always revisited the BHAGs and are they still the right BHAGs? Because you learn things from the market, from the company. And so you have to be flexible enough to shift. Then you now know the big goals. You can start working on the objectives and how are you going to measure progress on the objectives with key results. Now, you were in a meeting where we were reviewing everything we had accomplished, and people had come in having scored themselves. And they were going to have to articulate or defend their score in a room of their peers.
It was almost QBR style. Now that I look back on it, it was the most impactful meeting I've ever been a part of.
Right. And everyone in the room is talking about like, Brian owned this, and here's his score. The score's lower than we hoped. Here's what we could have done. Here's what we can do. Should we keep working on this? And so the first half of the meeting is a assessment and reflection, not for the purpose of criticism. Everyone felt very safe. It was for the purpose of going forward. What should we do differently? How can we improve? Because we want to hit these big, hairy ass goals. The second half of the meeting is then to say, okay, looking forward, having just reflected, what are we going to carry forward? What are we going to prioritize higher? And what are we going to move lower? And it was by the whole group, but also by the individual functions. And everybody knew before the meeting what to expect in the meeting. It wasn't the first time we'd done it. Everyone came in with scored, and everyone came in with candidates. But then, because we focused on how we communicate, we actually could discuss the candidates and challenge each other without it becoming personal attacks, without people feeling defensive or unheard. And in fact, the room had everyone who was on the marketing team. It didn't matter if you were just out of college or if you were a 20-year veteran. If you had a thought, a question, an idea, it was welcome. And one of my superpowers is I synthesize quickly. So I can say, okay, if we took this, this, and this, does that meet the need? Does that help us towards our BHAG? And then someone say, well, let's tweak this, let's turn that, and boom. And so what you saw in an hour and a half actually came because the muscle memory was always being worked. Every one-on-one talked about these things. Every staff meeting talked about these things. They weren't one and done. And this meeting, again, was set up with, please come with your scoring. You'll share it with the whole group. Peer pressure is a wonderful thing. And please come with your candidates. And what you saw was us get to the end, but you saw a bunch of people who had practiced a lot as a team, had a lot of respect for the different strengths in the room, and knew that the purpose here was to align, to identify how we could help each other, and to drive ourselves as a team to succeed.
Let me ask a tactical question around that, because I sat in that room because I'm like, I want to be able to take what you're doing and distill it out to the rest of the company. And I was not successful. And I think the power was, did you schedule those on a calendar a year out? Like, how did you stick to it? Because every company you use has some kind of goal setting tool, and oh shoot, goals were due yesterday. And so then I'm guilty of this too. Off the top of my head, I'd come up with 3 goals, send them out. And then at the end of the quarter, I did good, I did bad, and then we move on. As the leader, were you making sure, I don't want to use the word maniacal, but how are you making sure that you stuck to the script? Because you were trying to get the rest of us to do it, and your marketing team did it, but what are you doing to really make them stick to the script?
So I literally have a calendar, right? And it's on the calendar. The meeting's on your calendar. If you have a vacation during that week, someone else needs to have your materials. I tried, I was sensitive. I didn't do it over the holiday weeks because, let's not do July 4th if you're in the United States. Let's not do Christmas week. Those are not good weeks. But it was on the calendar. You knew where it was coming for the next 12 months. You knew that every week at the staff meeting, these things were going to come up. You knew when the offsite was going to be. And sometimes you got to flex, we have to make a change. But it was on the calendar. It was predictable. And I will ask you, Brian, what is more important than having clarity of what you're trying to do?
Nothing else.
Right.
Maybe.
So nothing.
Be having commitment, but it still has to be clarity to get the commitment. So yeah.
You can't commit to what you don't know. And when you get conflict in a team, it's often because people have different understandings of what we're trying to do. So if you're a leader of a team and you say, I don't have time for goal setting, I am seriously, what are you doing?
That's
It's your job. And it's literally the job. And it's not the job to tell people the goals. That doesn't work. Only 15%, this is part of the neuropsych, only 15% of the human population responds well to being directed. The rest of them,
15%. Okay.
that's it.
I
Just
didn't know there was an actual
15%.
number, but that makes sense.
Yeah. The rest of them, you tell them what to do, and their first reaction is a string of expletives under their breath, right? And then they don't do as good a job. Most people want to be engaged in articulating, crafting what it is they're going to spend the vast majority of their time on. And I've done that with SDRs, where their job is fairly rigid, but there's a lot of room for them to have some ownership. I've obviously done that with other executives, but making time and saying alignment, knowing what's important and alignment is the most important part of my job. And therefore, I am going to make the time. And the reason you don't make the time, Brian, is because you're being a tactical hero. You're firefighting. So if you want to be a strategic strategic leaders know where they are going.
And that's where you start with, and that's extremely important. And I've been frustrated. I've been the leader where I have failed on that, but then I realized if I'm not providing that clarity and that space for my team to produce those goals and actually participate in what those goals are, then I'm not doing my job. And that's so huge. And that drives me when I have a leader that also brings that. So, all right, in the interest of time, I shouldn't dig, but I'm going to ask just a follow-up question here. I was able to sit in your room to understand how to go from good to great. What do you think is a defining characteristic of a good to great team? How do I measure that? What does a team look like that is showing up good versus great?
So a few things, but I'll tell you what Ashutosh, the data scientist, our CTO, we set ambitious OKRs and we hit them over and over for 2.5 years. So number one, you aim high and you get so close to it that really you've hit them. So that's an effective team. Number two, no undesirable attrition. It's a team people don't want to leave, right? So, because by the way, people leaving your team is unbelievably expensive and disruptive. Not the recruiting, that's life, but the knowledge, the trust, the patois, if you will, you lose all of that, right? So I had a team at multiple companies. My teams stuck. They trusted each other. They knew how to push each other. They accomplished together. And then we set ambitious goals, and it's very rewarding to do something hard.
Yeah.
It's very rewarding.
You just have to do it once or twice because especially if you're early in your career, like that seems like a lot of work. I'm just here to get a paycheck. But once you start winning and you start hitting, you're like, oh, okay.
And if you're just there to get a paycheck, go find a different job.
Yeah.
Like you got to be, your life is a gift. There's time you can't get more of. So, if you're going to be at work, and my son is a brand new SDR, right? And being an SDR, sales development rep, that's a really grinding, hard job, right? You get very few successes. Your targets are high. It's basically you're a human punching bag.
Yeah.
Right? But he is so excited every week to learn more about how to be great at his job and how to learn what makes a salesperson great, what makes a sales manager great. He's teaching it, he's treating it as like his university. And it is. And does he love cold calling and getting rejected? No, because he's human and nobody loves that. But he loves the learning. So find something worth learning.
Working hard.
And learning.
Yeah.
And then, do batting practice. Practice stuff. Try stuff. Be continuously improving learner. Then work is more fun. Life is more fun.
It's a good call. All right. Let's move to the next segment, and I'm going to speed through this one because we're technically at time, but I purposely added a little bit more time because I knew that I could talk to you for 3 hours. But the next segment is called the Curveball Crusher. You've been talking about life giving you curveballs. You've developed a program called the Curveball Crusher. We've talked about it a little bit, but two questions here, two-part question. What inspired that, and what does that mean? And then what I would want to also talk about is the biggest curveball that's been kind of given to you. What's a time that you've failed or something that's really just come out of left field that's really knocked you down? What's the most challenging part of your professional career so far, and what did you do to get yourself back up?
Okay. So the metaphor of the curveball, I accidentally raised a baseball player. I wasn't a particularly good baseball player or softball player myself, but our second child was called to baseball and he's playing in college. But when you're the mom of a baseball player, particularly someone who's an outfielder hitter, you talk a lot about hitting. When he was probably 12, 13, he started using the word approach. I just need to work on my approach. Now, secret of connecting with your children is be interested in what they're interested in. So what's an approach? What does that mean? And as he matured, we'd keep talking about that. And I started to see parallel to the professional world. And I've always liked hiring former athletes because they know how to practice, they know how to be coached, they know how to lose, they like to win. They're a good DNA. So I was looking at this metaphor. I was like, the more senior I get in companies, the higher the proportion of curveballs to fastballs I get.
Yeah.
And frankly, I want everyone on my team to be able to crush fastballs. Like that should be, what'd you call it, an alley-oop, a layup? That should be easy. Curveballs are tricky. I'd love everyone on my team to be able to crush all the curveballs, but there are some curveballs. There was the moment at Bloomreach where we thought the entire business was dead.
Yeah.
Right? That is a serious curveball and not one that most people are going to be able to deal with, that anyone could deal with on their own. You need a team, right? And so the crushing curveballs is about that mindset. You are a leader or you want to be a leader, you will see a lot of curveballs. There is OpenAI, huge rocket ship, seeing a bunch of curveballs about how do we do this profitably? All right. Like this stuff is expensive, AI. And by the way, you asked, when I do the curveball crusher, I also create a bunch of AI tools so that my clients get batting practice. You want to practice, you want to try, great. I'll give you a safe space. Even when you can't talk to me, there's a safe space for you to do that. And whether it's how to deliver feedback, how to think through a problem, how to communicate a plan or communicate about an issue so that you can engage people in the plan. I've built custom GPTs to do that for people. So the biggest curveballs, there's been so many, but you asked in the professional world. I joined Dynamic Signal as the head of marketing. And, we had a good business. But I was going into the metrics, as I like to do. I'm a fairly data-driven person. And I was like, God, the win rate is bad. Like it's really low. That's a very expensive cost of acquisition. Now, we were hunting elephants. So every so often, like once or twice a year, you get a 7-figure, type deal that made everything look good. But, the machine looked like it needed a bunch of fuel or just to be retooled. I was a real tactical hero. I'm digging into the numbers. I'm digging into the messaging. I'm digging into the sales process. Go, go, go. And what I didn't do was stop and think, is there product market fit? Is it possible that's an illusion of product market fit? And either I don't have a strong enough buyer or I don't have what they really need. And I think I could have been a lot more effective as an executive for that company if I had paused from all that tactical heroism and asked some really hard, scary questions. Because often, Brian, when you ask that question, Bloomreach, and the shift that Raj led the company through following that episode, which we didn't have to. That business was healthy, it turned out. But he decided to diversify. And he said, I want us to have control over our destiny. So it meant we had to shrink, focus on what's important in order to diversify. And that is painful and it is hard, but it was the right thing to do. And I should have done that when I was at Dynamic Signal as well.
You didn't because you were too much into the weeds, or what did you think it was?
I was in the weeds. I was firefighting. I was doing the tactical heroism thing. And look, we had enough revenue that it was like, we had like 100 customers. It looked like we had product market fit. Like one of the things I came out of that learning about was how to have a conversation with a customer or prospect that actually gets you the information you want, which is people don't like to tell you they don't like you. They don't like to tell you your baby's ugly. Like, these are not things we like to do. So when you say to somebody, I have this idea and I want to share it with you, or I have this product, they often are going to say, oh, that sounds interesting. That sounds good. I can see that.
Yeah.
Right? So you're asking questions that are getting you an answer that's a false positive. Because the real positive is they're lining up to buy it, and they're buying it, and they're renewing. And if you don't have that piece of evidence, everything else you're hearing is happy talk. So after DISI, I spent a good amount of time learning what is the right way to actually understand what somebody needs. And I've written about this. It's a whole different podcast, but the concept that I could create urgency as a sales or marketing leader, I have concluded is complete and utter bullshit. What I can do is hunt urgency. And so if I know what pressing, painful problem I solve 10 times better than whatever they're currently doing, it's got to be 10 times, because what you're currently doing, you're going to keep doing unless you have an urgent problem. So I do something 10 times better for a problem that is already in your top 3. And I need to know that. And then I need to deliver and delight you.
Okay.
So figuring that out is fun.
Okay, that also sounds like, I don't know if you remember Sunny Wong, that worked. It was another Bloomreach legend who's doing strategy. He speaks on that same thing. He was on the podcast a couple weeks ago. All right,
Good.
Let's move to the next segment, because we're running out of time here, and I appreciate you even spending the amount of time. Walk me through your day. You are busy. You're doing a billion things. Do you segment your day in a calendar very structured, or how do you approach your day? Because I think for the person that wants to be amazing, how should they think about approaching their day? Do they schedule it a month in advance, or what are you doing? How do you best do it?
So I'm not sure you should copy me. I'm not sure that I'm great at this. You have to block time if you need time to write or think. So you got to block it. I use a lot of self-scheduling tools where people can drop onto my calendar, which means I can suddenly be like, oh, wow, I have 4 meetings today. So I always suggest, look at your calendar, day, week in advance, really understand what are your big goals, and are you spending your time on the things that lead to your big goals? So I told you I wrote a book. So one of my big goals was to write that book and to make the book as useful as possible for people who are newly diagnosed with cancer, because it's a massive curveball that actually knocks your world off its axis. And there is a way to deal with it. There is a way to face it that is better than panic disorder. So that's really important to me. And I made time to do that. And that
So
time
you're
came at other
intentional
cost.
with your calendar every single day.
No, I'm intentional with my calendar every week. The days, and so, okay, I'm going to block this much time, but my days are dynamic. My days each one is different. So I know what's predictable. I'm going to meet with clients. I have client appointments at these times. I have check-in meetings here. And then the rest is dynamic, which is why I have to preserve time for if I want to produce something, a video, if I want to write something, if I'm going to work on a new webinar, I need to block the time so that it doesn't become 9:00 at night, because frankly, I'm just no good at that hour.
Last question there. I want to talk about that, because I think the sports analogy, it's really going all out. What does your day look like, especially when you were in corporate America, even now entrepreneur? I'm up at 4:00 and I work out, and I'm normally working till 10. For somebody to be successful, what is an actual realistic amount of time that they should be working? Is it 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week? And I know it depends on what their company's looking for, but can you do it in 9 to 5 and go home and pack your lunch and go home? Is that possible?
Sure.
To be?
If you're clear on goals, if you're clear on your commitments, and if you know what it is you are capable of. So, and the more your job is leading other people, there's this myth now that, a manager can have 12 people reporting to them. Like, that team's going to suck.
Yep.
Like, the magic number is 6. And I think I'm a fairly masterful manager. And at about 7 or 8, I can see I'm not giving them what they need, the support they need, the guidance, the feedback for them to succeed. I do get up early. So I get up at usually about 5:45, 6 in the morning because I like to exercise. And if I don't exercise before the day starts, I won't. So I do my exercise. I've done it with a friend 4 days a week for 15 years. It's good to have a buddy because that holds you accountable and it's actually a lot more fun. Always eat breakfast. I did have help with my kids when they were little. This is very hard when you're trying to get the kids out if you don't have a mother's helper or, a stay-at-home parent. Kids get up at about 6:30, 7 in the morning, and, until they go to school, there's chaos reigns. Now, my kids were pretty young when they learned how to make their own breakfast. They know how to load a dishwasher. Like, I'm not their maid or their chef. So, we were all moving to get things done and to get out of the house. Work, I generally say I'd work from anywhere from 8:30 in the morning till 5:30. I'm bad at lunch. Like I am not, let's take a lunch break. I usually am like, shit, it's 2:00. I forgot to eat. So that's not healthy. I wouldn't recommend it. But I also don't drink coffee, and I do recommend that. But the other thing I did is on Fridays, as the sun went down, and I was always honest, even in the interviews, that this was going to happen. When the sun goes down on Friday night, I'm offline, and I won't be back probably until Sunday night. If you need me, you will have to call, and it will need to be because the Wall Street Journal needs a quote right now. Because I didn't choose to be an emergency cardiothoracic surgeon, and our work can fit in these boxes. Now, when I was working for a company that was in Israel and the time zones were completely fakakta, I did end up working on Sundays because they were on Monday, and, you can't be rigid, but you do need to set boundaries. The best thing for me in setting boundaries was my daycare was open at 7 till 6. Those were the hours I could work. And then I wasn't going to work when my kids were awake and they went to bed by 7:30, 8 o'clock. So I wasn't available. I also told people that and said, these are the boundaries, but the work will get done. I will be focused. If I give you my word that something will get done, it will. And if it can't, you will know with advance warning so that we can make adjustments. No surprises.
That's something I've had to learn the hard way, but over communication, because I used to not want to bother my boss. And so not because I was trying to hide, but over communication. That is huge. And I think to wrap that up, moms, women, professional women, in especially the tech space, you have been able to show that you can actually do it. You can be the great mom. You can be the great executive. You can do the things that you want to, and you can be successful at it. And don't let anybody tell you that you can't, because you've definitely shown that you can. And I really appreciate you being able to do that. Because me, I'm, my 2 older kids, their mom at the time, she stayed home. And we try to make it work because it's impossible. It's hard. But to try to do that and also to be a high-level executive at these companies and be a parent. But it's
hard. It's there are all kinds of choices. I don't think that my choice is necessarily right for everybody else. As Sheryl Sandberg said in Lean In, the choice of your partner is really important.
100.
My husband made choices as well so that we could do this. We chose to live and not relocate so that we could build infrastructure of schools and friends. It takes a village, right? And you can't be afraid to ask for help. And you have to be someone who will get it.
Yeah. Okay. This has been amazing, but what I would like to do is leave the last couple minutes because there's a couple of things that you're working on. We talked about GTM Flow. You did talk about a book. I want to leave the next, whatever amount of time as you have left, talk about what you're working on, what's coming out, how can people find you, how can people find GTM Flow? Sure. Give me the info.
Okay. So if you want to find me, the easiest way is go to www.gtm, go to market flow. There you can find out about the Curveball Crusher program. You can find out about the Curveball method. You can contact, if you go onto the contact page and scroll down, you can watch me in my band if that is something that would amuse you. We have clips there of singing. But if you are facing cancer, if you are somebody who has someone you love who is facing cancer, go to www.joelkaufman.com. no double F, no double M, no double N, just joelleKaufman.com, and sign up for Crushing the Cancer Curveball. There's also a bunch of free resources, things I built when I was going through treatment that made it easier for me to communicate with my medical team, because you're not going to remember day to day what happened. But if you document it, turns out communication works better. So I have a whole bunch of tools and resources. And the big one I want to leave is that my cancer year, which was 2020, turned into one of the happiest years of my life, because my approach to the journey was, how do I embed happiness tripwires that inevitably happen and make me smile over the course of this journey this week? So you talked about how do you set up your regimented week for work, but I want to encourage you to make sure you put in opportunities for smiling. So that could be, I hug my kid every day. For me, it was a letter I got from my son for every infusion. It was a joke I got from a Bloomreach buddy every day. It was texts telling me that the people were thinking of me. But I let people know what was happening. And what came to me were these moments that made me smile. And so if you want moments that make you smile, send a happiness tripwire out to other people and make them smile.
You went through cancer and it was the happiest moments of your life. And that's like Joelle Kaufman. Somehow you even like beat up cancer in a way that was just monumental. And it's amazing. So once again, Joelle Kaufman, 1F. I always messed up and put 2 Fs. Joelle Kaufman with 1F. And then gtmflow.com to learn about the Curveball Crusher and to learn how to be a better leader. Joelle, I thank you. I am thankful that our paths crossed so many moons ago at Bloomreach. I'm thankful that you reached out to me to be on this podcast. There are a million gems. I'm really excited about this going out for all the people. Thank you. I'm super honored. I'm super thankful for you. I appreciate you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Once again, this has been the Level Up Career Podcast, or how to be better at your job. You're definitely going to learn a lot from this one. We appreciate you. Until next time, see you later. Bye.
See ya.